I was there, winter of 1944. I don't remember the exact day I was captured. I only remember that it was cold. Not the kind of cold you know from home, where there are walls, a stove, the sound of a spoon against a porcelain bowl. This cold crept up from the ground, soaked through boots, through socks, straight into the bones. It wasn't loud. It was patient. We stood shoulder to shoulder, yet none of us felt warmer. Hours earlier, or maybe days, I no longer know, there had been artillery, orders, shouting about holding positions. Then it all dissolved. Not with a final explosion, but with silence. Silence was more frightening than anything. When the American soldiers appeared, I waited for the worst. We all did. We had been taught to wait for it. They would beat us. Humiliate us. Take revenge. That was certain. That was beyond doubt. But nothing happened. No kicks. No rifle butts. Just voices in a language I didn't understand, hands pointing directions, and rifles that were not aimed at our faces. I remember that moment clearly, not because it was violent, but because it was empty. As if something I had prepared myself to endure for years had suddenly been taken away. They marched us away. For a long time. Long enough that time itself lost meaning. My feet hurt so badly that every step became a decision. I wasn't a combat soldier. I had been a clerical worker attached to an anti-aircraft unit. Before the war, I had thought pain was something that happened to other people. I was wrong. We were separated from the men quickly. No explanation. No resistance. I remember feeling relief, and then immediately feeling guilty for feeling it. The first holding area didn't look like a camp. It looked forgotten. An old warehouse, broken windows, wind cutting through gaps in the boards. Hastily erected barbed wire. Mud and water beneath our feet. When they motioned for us to go inside and sit down, I almost cried. Not from fear. From relief. I had been standing for far too long. The benches were rough wooden planks. Unfinished, splintered. At first I felt only exhaustion. Then, very quickly, the pain arrived. It wasn't the pain of a wound. It was pressure, cruel, direct pressure into the hips, the lower back, places never meant to rest on frozen wood that felt as hard as stone. I shifted. No relief. I stood up. Better. Around me, others began to move as well. Grimacing. Clenching jaws. A few quiet laughs, the kind that come when exhaustion strips away shame. Then someone said what we were all thinking. Sitting hurts. It wasn't defiance. It was almost innocent. Like a child saying her shoes are too tight. The guards didn't understand. They looked at us, then at the bench, then at each other. One of them, a young man, barely older than we were, stepped closer. He pointed at the bench and shrugged. I don't know why I stood up. Maybe because I was near the aisle. Maybe because I was too tired to be afraid. I pointed at the bench, then pressed a hand to my lower back and winced. I spoke slowly, very slowly, as if to someone hard of hearing. Pain. He looked at me. Not angry. Not mocking. Just thinking. Then he walked away. We expected nothing. In the world we had been raised in, complaints from the defeated had no value. They usually only made things worse. An hour passed. Maybe more. When they returned, I didn't recognize at first what they were carrying. Only the familiar green-gray color, but not ours. Blankets. U.S. Army blankets. They spread them over the benches. No hurry. No eye contact. Just work. In some places, they stuffed straw underneath. In others, they shaved down rough boards. No speeches. No explanations. When they finished, one guard gestured, "Sit." No one moved. Then an older woman, her hair already streaked with gray, sat down, very slowly, as if expecting the moment to be a cruel trick. Her shoulders dropped. I sat too. The pain didn't disappear. But it softened. As if someone had placed a hand over it and said, "Enough." My throat tightened. Not from gratitude. From confusion. No one had taught us how to respond when the enemy listened. The days that followed felt suspended, unreal. Food was scarce, canned rations, thin soup, hard bread. Hunger was constant. But it was not punishment. We were issued oversized jackets. Gloves appeared. Not for everyone, but for some. When one woman developed severe frostbite, she was sent for treatment. No shouting. No accusations of weakness. Once, an American nurse, female, examined us. She did not look at us as enemies. She looked at us as patients. These small things began to accumulate. More dangerous than cruelty. Because they eroded what we believed to be absolute truth. I realized something terrifying. I was no longer afraid of them in the way I had been taught to be. That realization unmoored me. In my old world, authority relied on fear. Here, it relied on procedure. On paperwork. On rules. When rules were broken, punishment followed, but it was clear, predictable. No one was beaten simply to make an example. I began to understand that pain was not always the point. The war continued. Bombs echoed in the distance. We had no news from home. Anxiety never left. But there were moments, small, human moments. A bench that no longer made me want to cry. A blanket that smelled faintly of soap. A guard who shrugged when I awkwardly said, "Thank you." After the war, I rarely spoke about that time. Not because it was too horrific, but because it wasn't horrific in the way I had been prepared for. That was harder to explain. But if there is one memory I carry more clearly than the day of my capture, it is this. The day I sat down, bracing myself for pain. And realized it was no longer required.